to have Dr.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. We're excited to have Dr. Marte Gutierrez here to talk with us today as well. We're going to start off with the interview and then we'll go into a brief Q&A session. So if you come across any questions during the interview, just try and hold on to them until the end. And just a reminder that this interview is going to be recorded and published, so please be respectful during the interview and just note that any of your responses may be used on and off publications. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Gutierrez is one of our civil engineering professors, and he has worked all over the world in academia and research. And he was the founding chair of the Department of Civil Infrastructure and Environmental Engineering at Khalifa University. His focus is in geomechanics and energy and environmental sustainability. And I know that he has so much insight to share with us about his engineering experiences. So thank you, Dr. Gutierrez. Are you ready to get started? Okay. For my first question here, can you just tell me a little bit about some of your work in engineering and what the most impactful work you've done as a civil engineer is?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful humanitarian engineering series. Thank you, Juliana, and thank you, Julia. I'm very delighted and honored to be here. Well, my background takes me from the Philippines, where I did my bachelor's degree. Then I did my graduate degrees in Japan. Then I did my postdoc in Norway. In Norway, I got to work on really many interesting projects, from dams to offshore platforms to bridge foundations to geohazards, tailings dams. And then after 11 years in Norway, I moved to the US and I started as a faculty at Virginia Tech. I was there for 6 years. Then after 6 years, I moved to Colorado School of Mines. So the longest I've been, I guess, is in the US, close to 30 years now. And then while I was in the US, I've had the opportunity to spend sabbatical in France. I taught there for 1 semester. Then my other sabbatical was in Abu Dhabi, the United Arab Emirates, where I built the first Department of Civil and Environmental Infrastructure Engineering at Khalifa University. So yeah, I've been fortunate to have been involved in many projects, many parts of the world. Some have been very challenging, some have been very truly interesting. It's very difficult for me to choose one project, but if I will, maybe it's the work that I have done and have been part of regarding the design of foundation of offshore platforms in the North Sea. Those are some of the most magnificent structures I have ever worked with. I don't think I will ever have a chance to work on those types of projects, really massive structures requiring all kinds of disciplines and all kinds of design issues and constraints. So I guess that one. The other project that I'm really proud of was the big rock slide project that I was involved with, trying to understand what caused a big landslide in the Philippines, which killed many people, including children. So yeah, so those are the things I can point out.
In working in the North Sea, were you ever able to address this with sort of more of a sustainability type perspective?
Well, that's interesting question, very interesting. My work in the North Sea started about 30 years ago, lasted about 10 years. And at that time, there was really very little concern about sustainability. Yeah, we were concerned about the impact of the platforms on the offshore environments, on the seabed, potential oil spills, those things. But we never thought about climate change, for example. And Norway has been a very active producer of hydrocarbons. And we know that hydrocarbons are the main source of our release of CO2 in the atmosphere, and that has been affecting our climate. So at that time, there was very little concern for it. But through the recent year, particularly the last 10 years, Norway has realized their obligation to the planet and to humanity to try to mitigate the impact of their contribution by producing oil and gas in the North Sea, uh, to mitigate the impact of CO2 in the environment. So I've been involved again in the last 10 years with Norwegians with regards to carbon capture and sequestration. So I've had research projects with them. They're now very active. Norway has really made a complete turnaround. For example, they're banning fossil fuel vehicles in Oslo. And if you go to Oslo, you will be shocked. You will be shocked to find so many Teslas. It probably has the highest Tesla concentration per capita in the world. So yeah, so they're doing their best to change, to try to contribute towards the mitigation of the impacts of carbon capture. They've had, just recently, they're going to start the first industrial scale injection of CO2 back in the oil reservoir. They had a project before with the Troll platform where they captured the CO2 and put it back into the reservoir, but now they're doing that on a massive scale. So they have had some projects, we have had some projects together trying to improve geological sequestration of CO2, where we capture CO2 and put it back where it came from in the first place. I've also had projects with them, training students. We have brought the students to Svalbard, northernmost university in the world, to train them, looking at geology, suitable sites for sequestration of CO2. So yeah, it's been a big, big change from 30 years ago to the recent, where there's a real realization that this is probably the most important issue that we need to face.
And when did you start having this interest in sustainability? Was it before or after you worked in the North Sea?
No, it was really after the North Sea. We've been a little bit slow in realizing that we are facing a major problem. So I think, the issue of sustainability hasn't been a major concern maybe for 30, 20 years ago, but now it is a big concern. It's a big issue. Everybody has to deal with it now.
And when you were working up on this project, you said it was pretty interdisciplinary. Did you have a lot of different engineers from different cultures around the world?
Yes, I'm an engineer, but carbon capture sequestration requires a lot of expertise from other areas like geology, geophysics, economics, humanities, sociology. It's a multifaceted problem, so we need to involve people from different fields.
What is that like, working with people from lots of different fields?
I think it's very interesting. My experience in working with different countries and the different parts of the world in general is that, yes, we are different, but we have so much in common. People are generally, concerned and are good and try to do the best for everybody. But we do have some cultural differences, and it's important to be exposed to such cultural differences, and particularly for students later who will plan to work in an international environment. I think it is important to be exposed to many cultures as possible. And you will be shocked at how interesting different cultures are. People are different, yet we are the same.
Do you have any stories or about a situation that was particularly memorable about working with people from different cultures?
Well, I have maybe two or three. One was when I work in Abu Dhabi, for example. I was very surprised to find that our students were 80-90% female. Engineering students, 80-90% female. I found out later is that the reason for that is that male students are allowed by their family to travel abroad and study abroad. So most study abroad. But female students, the family like to keep them close. When they go to university, to the campus, they're even driven sometimes by their parents. because the university has a rule that only allowed vehicles could come to the campus, and only those that are allowed could deliver the students. So it was very interesting, and try to teach a co-ed environment. We still have a few male students in the class, so still a very interesting situation to try to build the department and to teach students where there's a very conservative view on mixing up genders in the class and everything. So, but I was a bit worried at the beginning, but it turned out it really wasn't an issue. It really wasn't an issue. But I was delighted that we could build a department that could uh, provide educational activities to female students. And I was very delighted to have that they have a sheikh, the president, who was very progressive. That he thought that female a very important part of society. So that was it. I was very proud of that, to be able to be part of that system, or that educational opportunity that was provided to female students. The other project that I had was very interesting, and it's in Japan. Japan also has some very traditional views about gender equality. We work in tunneling projects there, and one of the issues we faced was participation of female engineers and geologists. Uh, Tunnel engineers in Japan believe that the mountain is female, and during construction, female persons are never allowed in the construction. It doesn't matter if that person is the president or the prime minister, they just don't allow female during the construction. And this was a project that I had when I was in Norway, and Norway is really the leading place in the world as far as gender equality. Women are very empowered in Norway. Right now, the cabinet, the prime minister cabinet, has more than 50% women as ministers. So how do you deal with this? My institute wanted to send a geologist, female geologist, to Norway, to Japan, to work on the project. And Japan has a very traditional culture about this. That was one of the toughest issues I have to deal with and to discuss. But at the end, they decided it's best not to um, offend the sensibilities of Japan. And hopefully, gradually, Japan will open up to and understand that all these traditions are probably not well placed.
And was that a decision that was made by higher ups in your company, or?
Well, we had some discussion, and gradually it just dawned on them that it's a gradual process, that maybe it's best not to push this issue for the moment.
Right. Well, it's very important, I think, to respect cultures. But do you ever find that as you're working in these diverse cultures that you have conflicts with maybe what their culture might be, and how do you go about addressing that? Like, for example, when you were working in Japan.
I think, when one works in a foreign country, it's very important to approach everything with humility. Try to be as humble as possible, and try not to prejudge the culture of other countries or other people. That, I think, humility and respect, I think, are very important, because you can't go and barge into a country, say, I'm going to change this place right then and there. You will just offend people, and and not influence whatever it is that you want to implement. So we have to approach things when working abroad with humility and respect for traditions as well, and try to change it in a gradual process by showing examples, for example, for how to change ways that may not be the best viewed from our perspective.
Right. There's a delicacy that has to be approached with that. You have to be very careful, I'm sure.
It is very difficult sometimes, but it doesn't happen open. I must tell you that problems like these are not that common, are not common. So I don't have many other experiences where I have to deal with this. As I said, people are generally accommodating and welcoming.
So when we're talking about these different cultures, I wonder, how do you define what good engineering might be?
Well, yes, this is, as introduced, this is what we need to look at every time. We need to balance many opposing requirements. That's why we need engineers, right? So if it's easy, if it's already done, we don't need engineers. So we have many competing requirements to achieve a good design. We have to look at safety and economy. These are the two biggest factors. We have to balance economy and safety. And as I always say, these are two opposing requirements. But other than safety and economy, we're increasingly being asked to deal with other aspects like resilience. With climate change, we have to make systems that are resilient because it's very difficult to predict how climate change will impact our design. The demands that will come from climate change are still unpredictable. So we have to build in resilience into our system such that even though there will be some failure in our system, it will be able to recover. I think the number one concern we need to look now is sustainability. I think sustainability has to be built in every system that we design. I read somewhere that if we continue to consume the way we're consuming now, in a few decades, we will need three more Earths. Two more planet Earths. But there's no three more planet Earths. Our resources are dwindling. Our climate is crashing. So sustainability, I think, is for me the number one issue that we need to look at. We have to look at social impacts. We have to look at the benefits to the society. We have to look at potential impacts that we haven't thought about. We have to look everything. I think that the thing that binds everything for a good design is integrity. Integrity is very important. You have to keep your integrity when you work on projects like these and know what is required of you as an engineer from both from a legal aspect, but also from a moral aspect. So you have to be an ethical person. And unfortunately, I don't think we discuss ethics much in our classes, and we don't discuss social issues much. So that's why a program like this is wonderful. The humanitarian engineering program like this is wonderful to try to bring most of those issues into the students' experiences.
I definitely agree with you there on that. But have you ever had a situation where you've had to decide between the integrity between your morals and what the company that you're working for is telling you to do?
Unfortunately, not so much. Not many. I've been very fortunate, particularly Norway, which is very strong, ethics and very strong laws, and people have worked in a very ethical standards. I have heard, not my personal issue. I've heard some experience, particularly back in the Philippines. I've heard some experiences or some projects that have involved massive corruption, for example. That is possible.
Mhm.
But not personally. The only case that I've had that I say what's very difficult from a moral standpoint was in Japan again, because unfortunately the construction industry in Japan is somewhat affected by some undesirable people. It's being controlled by the local mafia, for example. They influence that. And in the projects that we have had in Japan, we wanted to introduce a shotcreting machine made in Norway. Shotcreting is a way to stabilize the face of the tunnel. You spray shotcrete with the jet on the tunnel. Now in Japan, a large percentage of that shotcrete falls down on the floor. So it's called the rebound. So, but the Norwegian system, the shotcrete sticks better to the surfaces and don't fall. So you would think that the industry will accept this shotcreting system, but it so happened that the contractors are paid by the volume in Japan. So the more shotcrete falls, the bigger the volume. So this thing is going to cut down on the contractors' profit. So they sort of rejected the system. But we thought that the saving could eventually be passed down to the public who are paying some of these public projects. So that's one example. So how do you deal with this? And it's very tough, so very difficult how you change an existing system that has a built-in practice that may not be for the best every time.
Right. In a situation like that, do you think it's the responsibility of the engineer to be more accountable to the company who's relying on that shotcrete for their income, or to the public?
I think at the end of the day, we should be, all of us should be, all of us should be concerned about the public, particularly if the project is a public funded project. If it's a private funded project, it's a different issue. But I think we should be concerned about the impact of our projects to the society. So in the case that I've been dealt with, maybe it's not a big and critical issue. Maybe they have a way to compensate for the problems, for the situation that I was talking about. But yeah, sometimes it's very, very difficult. How do you change it, and particularly when you are not part of the system, we are coming in from the outside, so how much you try to change in the system, it was kind of difficult, right? So sometimes you may not have the answer, so you try to do your best, but it's not always that you can make a change.
Do you have any advice for engineers who will be working in these probably frustrating situations where you have conflicting needs and desires?
Well, number one is it's important to communicate if you have concern. It's probably you won't be the one making the decision. Somebody else, you're not the project leader, or you don't own the company that's dealing with projects like these. But yeah, it is important to communicate, to let them know what your concerns are. Communication is very important. It's important to keep your records straight, keep important to have a paper trail for what you're doing if you believe that something is going to happen that may not be to the best. So those are the two that I can think of. And know your ethical limitations, know your ethical limits, know your ethical responsibilities. And yeah, those are the things that you can do. I mean, follow the ethical requirements that are required for your profession.
Now, when you say ethics, I'm going to ask a tricky question here. How do you define ethics? Where do you find the right code of ethics to follow? And how would you recommend going about deciding when to prioritize certain ethical requirements over others?
Well, first of all, you have to know, we have a set of ethics. I mean, I'm a civil engineer. As the civil engineers, the American Society of Civil Engineers have well-prescribed ethical requirements. The National Society of Professional Engineers, NSPE, also have a well-prescribed set of rules and requirements. So you have to know those very well, what those rules are. Of course, you have legal obligations as well, as far as contractual and obligations. You have contracts, you have to follow the contracts as specified. But the best, it's very difficult to really know and predict what's going to happen when you work and how to deal with ethical issues. When I was with Virginia Tech, one of ways we taught ethics in the class is by teaching case histories, vignettes of situations. And we ask the students to comment on how to deal with these issues. So yeah, so case histories, learning from other people's experiences, even if, you know, sometimes the case histories are not easy to judge. Learning from other people's history is the best way that students can learn how to deal with issues that deal with ethics and conflicts of interest.
Could you, if you're comfortable with this, would you mind giving us an example of a failure that you've experienced and something that you learned from it?
Yeah, aside from, wow, it's difficult because some of them have confidentiality. One of the projects that I've dealt with, and I'm going to say where it is just in general terms, was a project that really had big problems. And I think the problem started because of miscommunication, a big amount of miscommunications and differences in cultures and differences in expectations. Miscommunications because the language is different. And miscommunications on the applicability of certain construction procedures. So it really led to a very painful case. At the end, we were lucky that we were dealing with a culture that didn't, wasn't as same as in the US, where there's a lot of lawsuits and litigations. It was a society that wasn't very, there wasn't much into litigation. So they tried to just find a way to keep the failure, in fact, quiet and not known of. They found a way or a solution to deal with the problem. But in turn, we were told, please don't come back again. So yeah, so I think a lot of the problems that will happen are because of miscommunications, of expectations and requirements. So it's important to understand what the expectations are and the requirements and the differences in the culture, not just societal culture, but industrial culture, because different countries have different ways of performing their industry, carrying out their work, you know. So it's important to understand this, and again, try to approach working with other cultures with humility and try to understand how they function and try to function within that system.
Is there a method that you think works really well for getting to know other cultures, especially within industry?
Well, one of the things nice about the US is that we are exposed to different types of cultures. We are a very diverse society. And I say this compared, for example, to Norway, which has been very homogeneous, or Japan, also very homogeneous, and also the UAE, United Arab Emirates. So I think as a student, it's very important to try to meet as many people as possible. This is a good way for you to understand, you know, what are the differences that we may have and what are the similarities that we have. So when you have class projects, for example, involve other peoples from other countries, from other cultures that are different from your own. They may have some important things to bring that you may not be aware of. And it's a two-way process. Then you can also help your classmates, your colleagues to try to understand how it is to work in the US and what are the requirements to work in the US.
Yeah, it's amazing how much you can learn just from a conversation with somebody.
Please, yeah.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. I would like to open it up to a Q&A. Nicole, I saw you had a question. Would you like to ask it yourself?
Sure. I was just going to ask about different opportunities that you've had professionally and educationally, and how you found those in the first place and then decided to pursue them?
Yes, I think if you will ask me, the biggest break I've had was to be able to get my graduate degrees in Japan. So yeah, so I mean, don't limit yourself. You said, I just want to go to this country. You know, this is where I'm going to study. This is where I'm going to do my study abroad. Try to be open, because, you know, even countries that may not sound attractive may provide you an interesting background. You know, like I think a lot of students these days would like to spend time summer in Europe, for example, right, in Rome or in Paris and everything. Those are wonderful things, but there are other interesting countries now. And then it's truly a global society now. It's truly a global world where you know, where you can go to places now within, you know, matter of day, you can fly there. So challenge yourself. That's what I'm trying to say. Try and challenge yourself, be open to all kinds of possibilities. And you never know. I mean, this might give you a unique background that other people don't have. I mean, look at my case again. I've had a PhD from Japan and a postdoc in Norway. And all of those came to me almost accidentally by just reading newspapers and everything, and I learned about it. And I think, you know, it made for my life a very interesting life. You know, a lot of my classmates, they wanted to study in Japan, in the US. That was the normal route for my classmates in the university, study in the US. But I opened my mind and said, everybody's going there, so why don't I have a different experience? So I went to Japan and Norway, and my life has been a wonderful life because of, you know, open-mindedness in opportunities that are available in the world. So make yourself unique. I mean, go somewhere where people haven't really gone to, and there's a lot of problems that need to be addressed. There's a lot of exchange of ideas with other people that needs to happen. And by only keeping an open mind can, I think, we can, by only keeping an open mind can we address the global issues that we are facing. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. That was good.
Do we have any other questions for Dr. Gutierrez? One more minute. Well, Marty, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope everybody enjoyed our first interview series. We'll be doing this again probably in November, so we look forward to talking to more professors.
Well, thank you so much. This is wonderful to be able to share my own humble experiences and knowledge I've gained through many years and many travels, different parts of the world. So, yeah, so thank you so much. It's been a great honor.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
We have one more question. Go ahead. You can, if you want to text it, type it in the chat, that's fine, or you can say it out loud yourself, whatever you prefer. Give us a sec here.
Hello.
Hello.
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi. Yes. My question is, if you had the opportunity to, and this project was funded, what kind of things would you be creating?
I think this is a question to you.
Oh, for this project, for the interview series?
Yes.
Wow. Well, it would be really, really awesome to be able to talk to people from other colleges as well, other universities. I think that my goal with this project is to learn from other people's experiences, and especially, you know, we've had this great example of Marty here, but people who have experiences in lots of different cultures. And I think we have something that we can learn from everybody. So if I could do anything with this, I would love to get it broadcasted maybe a little bit more broadly, because I think if we could reach more engineers and start asking these questions about what makes good engineering and what makes sustainability possible as we go forward in engineering, I think that we'll find the answers to those questions by asking more people and finding a bigger audience. So if I had the funding, I would love to talk to as many people as possible.
And
Okay.
I will add, we would love to hear from students if there's someone you'd like us to interview. So we are open to, you know, if there's a professor you want to hear from on campus, let us know. You can contact any of us in humanitarian engineering, and then we'd love to have you come in and help with the interview. So we're very excited to talk to people all over campus about all kinds of things.
Thank you. I'm a son of one of Professor Gutierrez's students. I'd like to thank him for this.
Oh, great. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, if was that all the questions, Julia? I didn't see anything else in the chat.
That's all that I got. Yep.
Okay, well, awesome. Thank you all so much again for joining us, and thank you, Marty, for being with us today. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.